Okay, we're going to start reassembling our starter, and what we're going to start with is the tail section here and our brush plate. Now our new brush plate is going to come with all new hardware, so the first thing we want to do is take all this off. And what you're going to have is going to be a couple of nuts, a washer, and a number of sealing washers, and I'll give you a close-up of those here in a little bit when we get ready to reassemble, so you can see the proper order to get her in. And also on the end of this terminal here, there's an O-ring right there. You want to go ahead and take that O-ring off and set it aside. And one other thing we want to do when we go to put this brush plate back in place, in the housing itself, you've got the hole here where the starter lug comes through, where the bolt comes through. Then you also have this notch cut in the case itself, and what that's for is you have a little lug on the starter brush plate that locates in that slot in the housing to get it oriented properly. Also on the starter bolt itself, where the wire is welded onto it, that bolt can go in just about any position, but you want to be sure that you install it with the wire actually facing downward toward the brush plate like that, and that way when you assemble it, it'll have enough flex on the wire that it can allow the brush to move back and forth as the brush wears. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the bolt in through the case, and then I'm going to align the lug here on the brush plate with the slot in the case, just like that. Next, we'll pull this bolt through until it seats into the case, just like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start reassembling all the hardware onto this terminal lug here. And what I'm going to start with is the O-ring. Just kind of roll it down as far as you can, just like that. Next, you're going to have a series of 3 insulating washers. You're going to have 2 smaller diameter ones, and then you're going to have a larger one. You want to put the 2 smaller ones on first, followed by the larger one. Next, you're going to have a flat steel washer goes on, and then one of the flange nuts. And once you get that started, just run that down until it bottoms out. Then you want to go ahead and tighten that down. You don't want to just over tighten it, but snug it up real good. If you over tighten it, then it's going to damage the insulator washers. So just a good snugging is all that's required there. Okay, make sure your brush plate's still engaged into the alignment lug. One other thing I also did is on the bushing down here in the center, also apply just a very light coating of grease on that. You don't want to put too much in there, because if you do, that grease can come out and the armature will sling it around onto the brushes, and you don't want any grease on those brushes. Okay, next we're going to install the armature into the magnet housing. Now before I do that, if you'll remember when we went to take this apart, we took the Sharpie and made marks across it so that we could get the proper orientation of all of our parts. Well, of course, once we put all this stuff through the bead blaster and cleaned it up and painted it, we lost our marks. But now we had made marks on the very ends of it so we could still see how the orientation went. But what we also discovered was once we cleaned all that stuff up real good, you can actually see the factory markings on the nose piece and on the housing. Same thing on the back piece. So you can actually see the actual alignment marks. But you can still see where we had marks on the parts here, as after we cleaned them up, we kind of remarked them so we'd be sure where they went. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the armature in here. You got to be careful with it because that magnet's going to pull on it, just like that. Now we got to put our shims back on, and on the nose piece we know that we only had the one shim, so we know it goes right there. Next we'll install the nose housing. Just get it on there and line it up with the alignment marks right there. Okay, now we're going to go to the brush plate and the tail housing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reinstall all the original shims, just like that. And what I'm going to do with the brushes here is there's not really a way to hold those back while you're installing the armature. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert the armature from a kind of a side angle and then kind of work the armature down to depress those brushes in place, and then line it up with the alignment marks and squeeze it all back together. Just like that. Okay. Now we'll take our hardware, and what we did with the bolts is we just cleaned them up and painted them a little bit, and the kit came with new sealing O-rings to seal it to the case. So just put all that back together like that. Start your bolts in. Same for the other side. Also, when you start these bolts on here and start running them in, the little washers that go on that have a flat cut in them. Be sure that the flat is on the inside. That's what helps seals that O-ring to the case. Then just run your bolts down and snug them up. Alright, there we go. Last thing we'll do before we install this is take a little bit of grease, put a little grease on that O-ring, that way it'll help facilitate starting that back into the housing. And there you have it, one rebuilt starter. Okay, Randy's going to reinstall this starter, and basically we're going to go back in the same way it went out. He's just going to kind of ease up in there with it. We'll try to get a good shot here and not get right in his way. Yep. Just start that nose up in there, kind of work it around. That new O-ring is going to be a little tight, so you may have to kind of twist and wiggle it around some to get it to seat on in. There it's going. Okay. Next, he's going to go ahead and put his bolts back here in the back and tighten those up. All right, now we got that starter buckled in. Next, he's going to attach the starter wire. Now, one thing you want to watch when you're tightening that nut on that starter wire, if you need to hold to the terminal, the wire itself, because what's going to happen is when you snug that down, it may have a tendency to want to turn the entire starter lug. And if it does, it can turn it inside the starter itself, and it can either damage the wire or short it up against the case, and you don't want to do that. So just snug it down good, and then slide that boot back over it. And be done with that part. All right. Alright, so now we got everything all buckled back in. Now what I want to do is right before we put all these reduction gears and everything back in there, I want to go ahead and test this starter. Now most applications you're not going to be able to do that because the starter reduction gears don't come out separately, but on this old 300 it does. So what we're going to do is turn the key on. She's in neutral. We hit the old starter button and see what happens. Amen. Shoot, yeah, we're good to go. Okay, next we need to reinstall our reduction gears and our cover. And the way it come apart is the gears and that little intermediate shaft stuck in the cover itself. So Randy's going to take those off and reinstall the shaft in the case. And then next he'll take the gear out, and we have to do a little finessing to get it to line up with the starter and with the final reduction gear. There we go, just like that. All right. Next, you just need to reinstall the cover. Of course, we got a good gasket on this one. If your old gasket messes up on you, you can replace that. And just stick that rascal back on there. It's got alignment dowels to help line it up. Just like that. And just reinstall the bolts. All right, everything back in place. Boy, it's a pretty starter. All right, here comes the final check. Go for it, Randy. Shoot, man, look at that. There you go. Alrighty guys, well, that's going to complete our starter rebuild for our Honda TRX 300. And like I said, that procedure will work on pretty much most any ATVs, motorcycles, or side-by-sides. And you know, it's not that difficult to do, just kind of take your time. I mean, heck, if this old redneck can do it, I guarantee you can do it too. Alright, also be sure and leave me plenty of comments in the comment section below. And man, stop by the shop anytime. You never know what we're going to be working on next. Alright, well guys, as always, appreciate y'all watching. Y'all have a good one. Catch y'all next time around.
Does my hands look okay? Are they clean?
Look like girl hands. Oh my God. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Y'all have a good one. Catch y'all next time around.